Has debate jargon become too much of a chore? Does every round you enter leave you wanting to know more? Well, look no further because one clap is the key. It's time for Professor Graham and Kevin's ABCs. Hey debaters, welcome back to the episode of Professor Graham's ABCs Debate. I'm Professor Graham here with my pal Kevin, and today the word of the day is going to be voters. So without further ado, let's give the judge 3 reasons to vote for us. Voters, the biggest trap in all of debate. Voters tend to be a lot of people's way of delivering a final rebuttal, and I'm here to put that to shame. When somebody stands up and says the order is going to be voters, I immediately cringe back into my seat, because 9 out of 10 times they are lining up to give a subpar overview for literally a million disconnected ideas that happened in the debate. That's not a bash on people who use voters or say them, but this anecdote should serve as an example of what judges actually think of when you say certain things. Instead, you should avoid saying voters altogether. So instead, we'll use this episode as a vehicle on how to properly give a final rebuttal without doing the voters thing. So without further ado. Tip number 1. Overviews are key. I'd look towards the overview video on how to do these more properly, but the best way on how to do an overview in the final rebuttal is to write the ballot for the judge as efficiently as possible. Ideally, the words that come out of your mouth should be the ones written directly onto the ballot. The structure for this is to explain your impact, or the reason why you win, and dive into the specifics on why you think that means that you've won the round. My favorite way of doing this is by saying the phrase, X impact outweighs and turns their case for 3 reasons. That model is perfect for developing a good overview because it means that you are acknowledging that your impact is ideally the reason why you win, and that you've done the prerequisite work to have 2 independent impact turns also built into your calculus. This forces you to do work earlier in the debate to cause this setup to be effective, and is a really powerful way of starting a speech, with 3 specific warrants on why the judge should vote for you. Of course, there's nuance in every argument you go for, Kevin. If you're going for a counterplan, of course you're going to have some nuance in the overview, still explaining your impact, but also briefly explaining how your counterplan alleviates those concerns. If you're running topicality, for example, it won't be as simple as other impacts. But no matter what you do, your rebuttal will always have some impact, which is why this template is super helpful for helping craft good overviews. Tip number 2, narrow down. Debates tend to become chunkier in the middle, whether it be an event where there is literally disproportionate speaking times or just forced depth on certain arguments teams really want to win. They become a lot more focused on certain issues instead of concerned with everything. The most important thing that you need to start doing is go for less. This sounds counterintuitive because you think that you're decreasing your potential win conditions for the judge to vote on. But I promise you, building the wall up on one position is far better than hoping you accidentally win 1 out of your 9 pieces of paper going into the final rebuttal. A hyper-developed DA with 4 links to the affirmative is harder to dismantle than 3 half-baked links that hardly applied before this speech. This applies to the AF too. In both cases, realistically, if you're going for extinction-level impacts or even larger ones in general, you only get to extinction once. Saying that you have 5 internal links to extinction isn't really more convincing to me than one really good explanation of how you get there. Always narrow down. Keep only what you need alive in the final speeches because they're what you need to win. Tip number 3. Close the doors. The point of the final speeches is to make sure that victory is impossible to take away from your grubby little mitts. This is why you need to start closing doors, or hedging your bets, or covering your bases, or whatever weird analogy you want to use. The most important kind of work to do here is to start saying the words, even if. Those help explain why even if your opponents make the most clever argument they can, you've already preempted that and are covering for it. This is really difficult to do and a skill that takes practice, but over time, you'll start to realize what you need to do to secure your lead. This is especially important for people who don't have the final speech of the debate because you actually need to predict what your opponents will do, or you run the risk of them answering all of your arguments and just barely beating you out. Well, there's actually a little more. Another way to close the doors, although it's usually implicit, is to sprinkle in some phrases like, don't allow new arguments in the next speech. No matter what event you're doing, saying things like, our final strategy was predicated on concessions made by our opponent's last rebuttal, so hold the line, tend to be pretty powerful. While I don't really like these filler phrases like hold the line necessarily, it's kind of essential to get more buy-in from your judge and punish your opponents for being weasels that squirm their way out of everything. Well, I think that's it for all my hot tips on how to give voters. Got anything to add, Kevin? Loser? Dude, I don't even know her. Hey, thanks again for watching today's episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. As always, I'm Professor Graham, and that's my pal Kevin. Yeah, if you ever need any help with debate stuff at all, my email should be right up here. Just make sure you CC your coach. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any debate tips that you might need. I'll drop that knowledge on you. Bam. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure. See y'all later.